Where is the first field where self-driving technology can be applied? The answer is logistics. Unlike taxis or private cars that navigate the intricate maze of alleyways, large trucks only travel along designated routes. They simply load cargo at ports or warehouses and travel along predetermined routes to their destination. Unlike people, they don't need to eat, sleep, or rest in between. Because of this, the first job to disappear when self-driving cars become commonplace won't be taxi drivers, but truck drivers. While self-driving is important, electric trucks are also promising. Traveling long distances can significantly reduce fuel costs and also change the logistics system. Currently, cargo handling takes place outside warehouses due to the exhaust fumes from diesel engines. However, electric trucks don't emit exhaust, so they can enter the warehouse. It's not well known to the public, but related companies are already fiercely competing. Development is underway and some have already completed test runs. Tesla is also eyeing this field and announced that they would unveil the autonomous electric truck, Cologne, within a year. Although it's practically indefinitely postponed now. Han Minga didn't answer immediately but asked me, "Then how can you help us?" The surest way to quickly solve various problems is to start from the beginning. The root of the problem is airbags. Essential parts like airbags aren't ordered on an as-needed basis but are subject to long-term contracts based on vehicle production plans. From the supplier's perspective, they have to prioritize supplying existing contract volumes, so additional orders will inevitably be pushed back. This is why Unsung Motors is facing supply difficulties. First, I'll divert some of the airbag supply that Keros is receiving to Unsung Motors and also request an increase in production volume. Currently, Keros has supply contracts with 3 companies. We've increased our order volume in anticipation of new vehicle production. However, our new car launch has been delayed due to Big One. Therefore, diverting some of the supply won't cause any significant issues. After resolving the airbag issue, we need to crack down on short selling. Then the stock price will rise and shareholder complaints will subside. Selling off the truck division would be a condition then. Unsung Motors' large truck division is barely profitable, so if you were to sell it off, the market would take it as good news. You could also secure funds through it. They were probably considering selling off some businesses anyway for the restructuring of the ownership structure. After a moment of thought, he nodded. We need to have a more in-depth conversation. Back at the office, I called team leader Seo Sangwon. Are you very busy? I'm all right. Recruited as an M&A expert, he and his team were in charge of connecting subsidiaries to facilitate cooperation. Even though ownership wasn't changing hands, coordinating the terms was quite a brain teaser. There's one more thing I need you to do. What is it? Go to Unsung Motors and negotiate the terms of the sale. After hearing my explanation, he gave a wry smile. Team leader Seo Sangwon left Unsung Motors with the stigma of being a traitor after the failed X-Corp acquisition and joined our side. But this time he has to negotiate against Unsung Motors. If you're uncomfortable, I can assign it to someone else. No. Business is business. After team leader Seo Sangwon left, I called senior manager Sang Yeep. Senior manager Sang Yeep, having come up to the CEO's office, asked, Chairman Im Jin-young gave out cars, right? Was there a gift for me too? I shook my head. No, there wasn't. Senior manager Sang Yeep looked disappointed. I like cars too. You just got a Porsche 918 recently, didn't you? That's that, but can I borrow a Bugatti Veyron for a month? It's a car that's hard to drive even if you have the money. Can that car even run on regular roads? The chassis is so low I don't think it can get over speed bumps. That's why there's a separate navigation system that only marks roads without speed bumps. You can't even go into alleys. Is this the level of inconvenience you have to endure to drive an expensive car? I really want to drive it at least once. Is there any way? I'll ask if you can test drive it on a track. Senior manager Sang Yeep's expression brightened at my words. Really? There's something you need to do before that. What is it? Buy some stock. After finishing my conversation with senior manager Sang Yeep, I called Chairman Im Jin-young. I'm enjoying the car you gifted me. Ellie and Hyunju also said to thank you. Haha, I'm glad you like it. Since I received a car as a gift, I was thinking of giving you a gift in return. I'm looking forward to it. What kind of gift is it? In terms of value, it'll be worth more than 1 billion won. Most of Chairman Im Jin-young's assets are tied up in stocks. But he's not without money. The slush fund that the late Chairman Im Il-kwon hid in overseas accounts probably exists. After hearing my words, Chairman Im Jin-young chuckled and said, "I've received too big of a gift compared to what I gave. Thank you." After saying goodbye and hanging up, Taekyu asked, "Isn't it enough for just us to profit? Is there a need to tell them all this?" "That's a very good point. Let me reiterate, short selling itself isn't bad. It's the manipulation that goes with it that's the problem. Institutions and foreigners have shaken down individual investors like this countless times. This is why the Korean stock market is called the graveyard of retail investors. This is an opportunity to teach those who mess around in the stock market a lesson." I then made a call to the United States. "Hello, this is Kong Jin-hoo." The other person answered the phone cheerfully. "It's been a while, Mr. Kong. How have you been?" "Yes. Is the chairman doing well?" "Of course. I was even thinking of visiting Seoul to see you, Mr. Kong, since I'm bored. I'd like to visit Atlanta as well." "Haha, come anytime. I'll give you a tour of the Coca-Cola headquarters. You can drink as much cola from around the world as you want inside. I sometimes go there to drink a few glasses myself." After exchanging pleasantries, I got to the main point. "I was thinking of letting you know about a good investment opportunity." He then jokingly said, "I don't know if I should listen. These kinds of things are often scams." That's true. If you have a good investment opportunity, why would you tell others instead of just investing yourself? I said with a smile. "Why don't you hear me out and then decide? Are you aware that speculative forces are currently playing games in the Korean stock market?" "Of course. I heard Albert is leading it." The concept of value investing has existed for a long time, but the first person to formalize it into a theory was Benjamin Graham. Warren Buffett was greatly impressed by his lectures during his student days and further developed the theory to create his own investment style. Warren Buffett's investment strategy is simple enough for anyone to follow. It's about buying undervalued stocks cheaply and holding them for the long term. Of course, he also engages in short selling, but it's strictly for hedging purposes, not to profit from it directly. On the contrary, he is very negative about speculative capital. He has criticized Carl Icahn several times and has argued that the government should step in and regulate it. So, about that, I explained my plan to him. Warren Buffett burst out laughing. "Haha, that sounds interesting." "It's not just interesting, but it's also an opportunity to make money. It will be much easier if the chairman helps." "All right. I can't miss out on such a good opportunity. The way to make money in the stock market is to buy when the price is low and sell when it's high. But in reality, the opposite happens. When the stock price falls, there are fewer buyers and trading volume decreases. Conversely, when the stock price rises, there are more buyers and trading volume increases. As the Korean stock market continued to decline, trading volume also decreased significantly, and even small sell orders caused the stock price to fluctuate. When individuals, unable to withstand the further decline in stock prices, started selling, that was the volume to buy to cover the short positions. However, unnoticed, trading volume gradually increased. Someone was continuously absorbing the selling pressure, and despite the short selling, the stock price rose slightly. Just as hedge funds began to sense something was wrong, Unsung Motors suddenly announced a bonus issue. "As part of our shareholder-friendly policy, we will implement a bonus issue, distributing 0.1 shares of common stock for each share held. In cases where the number of shares changes, such as a reverse stock split or a bonus issue, the shareholder register is closed. According to regulations, margin trading must be settled in this case. Although a bonus issue is used as a way to counter short selling, it's not a fundamental solution. Unlike a rights issue, a bonus issue is merely a change on the financial statements, with no change in total equity. Still, it has the effect of temporarily triggering short covering and raising the stock price. Short selling in Unsung Motors accounts for 25% of the total trading volume. This is the highest figure among both Kospi and Kosdaq stocks. Since they could still exit with a profit even if they covered their short positions now, it wasn't a major problem. But this wasn't the end of it. Suddenly, Kong Jin-hoo appeared in front of the media and announced, "Recently, the domestic automobile industry has been facing many difficulties. In response, Karos has agreed with Unsung Motors to provide support with the airbag supply under our contract. We believe the delivery delays and recall issues will be resolved quickly. The market was shocked by this unexpected announcement. The biggest reason for Unsung Motors' stock price decline was the airbag issue. Not only was it surprising that a solution to the supply problem, which was expected to take months, was presented, but it was even more shocking that OTK company stepped in. Could Kang Jin-Hu possibly be helping Unsung Motors? Unsung Motors' stock price soared as soon as the announcement was made. The hedge funds that had been relentlessly shorting were taken aback. They rushed to buy to cover their short positions, but for some reason a significant portion of the float had disappeared. There were only buy orders and no sell orders, causing the price to skyrocket further. Unsung Motors stock rose 17% on the day of the announcement and another 11% the following day, but on the contrary trading volume continued to decrease. Following that, OTK company released a public announcement. OTK company acquires stake in Cell Twins, Biogen and SLJ. Simple investment or entry into the bio industry. According to company officials, all possibilities including mergers and acquisitions are being considered. Which stocks will benefit from OTK company's investment? While hedge funds' primary short target was Unsung Motors, their secondary target was bio stocks. Compared to Unsung Motors, bio stocks with their relatively smaller market caps suffered even more from short selling. Just as buying stocks makes you hope the price will go up, short selling makes you hope the price will continue to fall. Because of this, short selling forces had been spreading all sorts of false information in the market to induce price declines. Accounting fraud rumors, major shareholder selling rumors, new drug approval rejection rumors and clinical trial participant death rumors and so on. It was actually effective, and bio stocks plummeted by more than 40% in a short period despite no significant negative news. But then OTK company suddenly started buying shares. Has Kang Jin-Hu ever invested and failed before? This indicated that bio stocks were undervalued. As the truth became known, bio stocks which had been repeatedly plummeting, all rose by 20%. Short selling is structured in a way that you lose money as the stock price increases. The hedge funds were caught off guard by the sudden turn of events, and the executives and shareholders of bio companies who had been suffering from short selling cheered with their arms raised. People's reactions ranged from dumbfounded to bewildered. Who is Kang Jin-Hu? He first appeared in the financial market during the S46 incident, shorting Samsung Electronics and buying put options. During Brexit, he earned tens of billions of dollars in the British and Japanese foreign exchange markets. And during Ronald's election and Big One, he similarly made a fortune worldwide. Kang Jin-Hu is arguably the most famous financial speculator of the 21st century. Is it an otaku versus hedge funds? Isn't it just speculator versus speculator? Isn't he pretending to be good now, even though he shorted Samsung Electronics himself? Is it, do as I say not as I do? Whatever it is, let's just get rid of short selling. Short covering will continue to come in. Looking at the volume they've shorted so far, this is just the beginning. Never sell, just hold. Small shareholders of Cell Twins, let's hang in there. The biggest loser due to the surge in Unsung Motors stock price was Albert Management. Carl Singer was in shock. Why on earth would Kang Jin-Hu? Kang Jin-Hu was the very person who started this whole mess in the first place. On the contrary, he had only applied more pressure. No one had imagined he would offer help. The short selling that had been pouring in had been absorbed by unidentified foreign capital, including Golden Gate. They would have naturally known about this announcement in advance. Could there have been some sort of deal? His hunch was right. Unsung Motors announced a stock split, the sale of its large truck division to Keros, a change in its governance structure and a share buyback. This was another piece of good news. The stock price soared again, not only recovering all the previous gains but now even facing the risk of losses. There was a way to completely suppress the buying momentum by dumping a large amount of short positions at once. But with Kang Jin-Hu taking action, the market trend had completely reversed. Reversing that trend again was not going to be easy. Some experts predicted a bright future, expecting cooperation between Keros and Unsung Motors. Everything had gone wrong because of Kang Jin-Hu. Now the only way out was to liquidate the short positions as quickly as possible. But the more they bought, the higher the stock price went, and the higher the stock price went, the more buying followed, increasing their losses. Carl Singer gritted his teeth and shouted, "Kang Jin-Hu, you son of a bitch. Unlike Unsung Motors, where short covering was happening relatively quickly, bio stocks showed a balanced equilibrium between buying and selling pressure. Unsung Motors' stock price rebounded as soon as the immediate problem was resolved, thanks to its stable sales and profits. On the other hand, the overvaluation issue for bio stocks had not yet been resolved. How can the value of a company be assessed? There are various indicators for valuation: PBR, PR, ROE, and so on. However, these are just indicators and not absolute standards. It's inherently impossible to compare fundamentally different businesses like manufacturing, distribution, service, IT, and gaming using the same criteria. Especially for bio stocks, future growth expectations are more important than current sales and profits. Even if a company is continuously making losses, once a drug gets sales approval, sales and profits skyrocket from that point onward. However, the outlook for bio stocks was generally negative. Deep distrust in the Korean pharmaceutical industry underpinned this sentiment. A biosimilar is a drug that is a near copy of an original biological medicine whose patent has expired. It is produced using molecular biology techniques, utilizing effective substances from living cells or tissues. Unlike synthetic drugs, which can be easily made by knowing their chemical formulas, biological drugs that use living cells as raw materials are difficult to replicate. Due to differences in various conditions during the production process, it's impossible to create a perfect copy. Strictly speaking, and only similar drugs can be made. Manufacturing itself requires high-level technology, and after manufacturing, separate clinical trials and approvals from institutions in each country are necessary for sales. Currently, developed countries like the United States and Europe are leading the biopharmaceutical market. The question is whether Korea truly has the capability to produce biosimilars. The forces driving the short selling had been spreading all sorts of rumors. The most prominent rumor was about accounting fraud. They claimed the books had been intentionally manipulated, and considering that, the stock price should fall further. Depending on where accounting standards are applied, it could be accounting fraud or not. When bio stocks surged due to OTK companies' investment, hedge funds once again spread accounting fraud rumors to induce a stock price decline. Bio companies had been fighting short-selling forces for a long time, even pleading with the government about how short-selling was hindering their businesses. They had used almost all available measures like stock splits and share buybacks, but they couldn't stop the short-selling. Hedge funds, well aware of this fact, continued their short-selling instead of immediately engaging in short covering. Ironically, domestic securities firms joined in. Besides short-selling, bio stocks also had a high volume of margin loans taken out by individual investors to buy shares. With the stock price plunging by more than 40% in a short period, there were concerns about massive forced selling, margin calls. In fact, for securities firms, it was a no-brainer, a sure-win situation. They made money by lending customers shares to hedge funds for fees and by providing margin loans to individuals. Since they held the shares as collateral anyway, if the stock price fell and there were concerns about principal loss, they could simply execute forced selling and recover the funds. Despite being essentially a loan with no risk of principal loss, the interest rates were over 10%. The nature of institutions is to make money whether the stock price falls or rises. That is, unless they directly engage in short selling themselves. However, securities firms not only lent out shares for short selling but also joined in the short selling spree in line with the attacks from speculative capital. They didn't care about the potential harm to their clients. All that mattered was making a profit. Amidst all this, when OTK company announced its acquisition of bio stock shares, the falling stock price suddenly soared. Unlike the hedge funds that had been shorting for a long time, securities firms had only recently started short selling. While the absolute amount of losses couldn't compare to the hedge funds, the loss rate was much higher for the securities firms that jumped in late. Securities firms collectively released negative reports, trying to induce individual investors to sell. Bio stock overvaluation controversy. How long will it last? Biosimilar market. Competition getting fiercer. Survey results. Consumers still prefer original drugs. Very low probability of biosimilar approval. Many hurdles expected before commercialization. Normally, this would have been enough to shake the market. But this time they were up against a formidable opponent. What the hell is this nonsense? They're practically holding a shamanistic ritual to make the stock price fall. There's no need to listen to those guys. Just remember that Kong Jin-Hu is buying. I hate Kong Jin-Hu, but I'll trust him this time. Trust in Kong Jin-Hu and let's go. They're doing all this crap to cover their short positions. Never sell your shares. If we hold on a little longer, we'll win. The only thing to keep in mind right now is to just hold on. Since Unsung Motors involved my own interests, I avoided buying shares directly. Instead, Golden Gate and Chairman Im Jin-young were actively buying, and they had already made over 30% in profits. Instead, we focused on buying bio stocks. Compared to value stocks, growth stocks offer higher returns but also come with higher risks. The most challenging aspect is picking the right companies. If you had invested in Samsung Electronics during the IT bubble, you would have made tens of times your investment, but if you had invested in Serum Technology, you would have only been left with a few thousand won. The same applies to bio stocks. Some companies will experience significant growth, while others will collapse. Senior Sang Yeep was the one who picked the stocks. Even without special abilities like mine, he has a basic instinct for investment. Back in our club days, we would only pore over financial statements and disclosures, but now the situation was different. Just expressing an intention to invest was enough for them to reach out to us first. Senior Sang Yeep toured headquarters and factories, and held meetings with management to analyze each company. In terms of technology, CellTwins is the best. Its growth potential is also significant. It's already up 20% from the low point. Doesn't matter, we need to buy more. I think it will break through its previous high and keep going up. What's your basis for that? Developing new drugs requires enormous costs and time. To compensate for that, they are granted exclusive rights to sell for a certain period. Why do you think they make generic drugs even when there are original drugs? Because they're cheaper. Senior Sang Yeep nodded and said, "That's right. The patents for biopharmaceuticals have been gradually expiring for the past few years. If you have the technology to make generic drugs, you can strike gold. Right now, CellTwins is awaiting approval for Plectra in the European Union. Once that's approved and European sales begin, the atmosphere will change drastically. Plectra, a generic drug made by CellTwins, has been approved by the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety and is being sold in Korea, but it has not yet been approved in Europe and the United States. Currently, they have completed global clinical trials and are awaiting approval from the European Medicines Agency. If approved in the European Union, the possibility of approval in the United States will also greatly increase. The doors to a massive market would open. Since Plectra is not the only generic drug awaiting approval, its approval is good news for the entire biostock sector. I nodded. Buy as much as you want. Got it. Senior Sang Yeep started buying aggressively. If the future outlook is good, a temporary drop in the stock price is not a problem. With the capital we have, it's enough to absorb all the short selling pouring in. But a few days later, an announcement was made. Plectra unanimously approved by European Medicines Agency (EMA). 100% identical effect to Procade. Path to European Union exports opens up. The annual sales of the original drug Procade are about $10 billion. Even if they take just 30% of that market share, it's $3 billion. Once exports to the European Union begin, sales and operating profit will more than double. As news of the approval spread, CellTwins quickly hit the daily upper limit. Other bio stocks also surged in anticipation. I clicked my tongue in amazement. Your skills are still sharp. Senior Sang Yeep grinned. Still useful, right? Individual investors who had been holding out while enduring hedge fund attacks and short selling cheered. Another piece of bad news for the short selling forces was the exchange rate. There are two main ways to counter speculative capital's short selling. One is to raise the stock price and the other is to lower the exchange rate. As the stock market turned bullish and capital flowed in, the exchange rate began to decline. At this point, Berkshire Cashier also announced the acquisition of shares in several companies. Warren Buffett stated that the Korean stock market was significantly undervalued and that they would continue to increase their investment in Korea. The exchange rate fell even faster. While domestic capital is not significantly affected by the exchange rate, foreign capital is highly sensitive. Even if they make a profit from their investments, they will ultimately suffer losses if the exchange rate depreciation exceeds those profits. To cover their short positions, they had to buy back the shares they had shorted, but the falling exchange rate made the actual stock price even more expensive. As the stock price and exchange rate moved in unexpected directions, causing their losses to snowball, hedge funds that could no longer hold out began to pull out. With various positive developments and short covering orders pouring in at once, the stock price continued to rise. Securities firms also reluctantly started short covering. A stock price that is too low is a problem, but a stock price that is too high is also a problem. We diligently sold off the shares we had bought, securing our profits. All those short-selling bastards are completely screwed. Everyone, you've worked hard holding on without selling. There's finally light at the end of the tunnel after all that holding. The Korean stock market may be smaller than your country's stock market, but our market is also great. We have globally renowned Seo Sung and Eun Sung and global speculator Kong Jin-Hoo. Never disregard the Korean stock market again. With the short-selling forces retreating, the Korean stock market regained some semblance of peace. The problem is that a similar situation could reoccur at any time. Whether it's restricting short selling or revising the system to allow individual investors to short sell, the financial authorities remain unmoved despite the barrage of criticism. Securities firms that should be protecting their customers are making a living off short selling. No wonder the Korean stock market is called the graveyard for retail investors. Although the stock market had turned bullish for the first time in a while, the hottest market was elsewhere. It was the cryptocurrency market. Bitcoin, which had started to rise at the end of the year, had finally surpassed $10,000. A few years ago, when Bitcoin reached $100, the reaction was one of disbelief. When it hit $1,000, people thought it was crazy. But when it reached $10,000, everyone was speechless. Moreover, instead of showing signs of decline, it continued its upward trajectory. No one could even guess how high it would go. The creators of new coins and early investors had made billions or tens of billions of dollars in just a few years, even changing the world's rich list. I was astonished when I received the report on K Company's performance for last year on Vansum. The fact that it had increased hundreds of times compared to the previous year was secondary. The profit is greater than the revenue. The revenue was 533.4 billion won, but the profit was 735 billion won. In other words, they were making 151 in profit for selling a 101 pen. How is that even possible? Revenue is the money a company earns from selling goods or services. For example, if you sell a 101 pen, 101 is recorded as revenue. However, if you spent 91 on raw materials, labor costs, distribution costs, etc., the actual money left over is 10-1. This 10-1 is the profit. In a normal situation, profit can never exceed revenue. In industries with relatively low costs such as games or software, profits can exceed several tens of percent, but most manufacturing industries are around 10%. Even that is the case for large corporations, and many small and medium-sized enterprises have less than 5%. I was dumbfounded and asked, how can profit be greater than revenue? Senior Sang Yip replied, that's the strange thing about this market. Just as securities firms receive commissions from stock trading, cryptocurrency exchanges also receive commissions. Although it varies from one securities firm to another, stock trading costs are about 0.4%. However, Vansum's is 1%. Looking at this alone, it seems like a 2.5 times difference, but there's a trap hidden here. Of the stock trading costs, 0.3% is tax paid to the government, and the securities firm's commission is less than 0.1%. On the other hand, since there are no taxes on cryptocurrency transactions, the transaction costs are entirely the exchange's profit. In reality, cryptocurrency investors are paying more than 10 times the commission compared to stocks. It's virtually extortion, but there weren't any significant complaints. The reason is that the price of coins kept skyrocketing. If you could make a fortune just by buying, what did it matter how much the commission was? They don't receive the commission in cash, but take it from the coins being traded. For example, if 1 BTC is traded, the exchange takes 0.01 BTC. Most of the exchange's operating costs are labor and server maintenance. With low costs, the operating profit margin is over 50% even in normal situations. However, cryptocurrency prices have surged recently. They received 10,000 won worth of coins as commission, but when they closed the books, it was worth 20,000 won. So even after deducting various expenses, the profit exceeded the revenue. After hearing this, Taekyu said, "This is a truly insane market." Having hit $10,000, Bitcoin surpassed $15,000 in just a few days, and now there were even predictions that it would exceed $20,000. It is no exaggeration to say that the cryptocurrency market has been gripped by madness since the end of last year. Because of this, there were many opinions that the bubble would burst, but instead the market size had more than doubled. Governments, financial institutions, and financial companies in various countries were busy preparing countermeasures. We also gathered in one place to hold a countermeasure meeting. I Taekyu, Hyunju Nuna, Ali, Senior Sang-yeep, and Henry attended the meeting. Hyunju Nuna said while smoking, "I'm glad I listened to you and invested even 30 billion won late. It's up more than fivefold now." Taekyu nodded. "See? I told you to listen to Jin Hu. Money flows wherever there is profit to be made." However, even hedge funds were cautious or negative about cryptocurrencies because the investment risk was too high. Ellie said, "You know what Warren Buffett said recently? That cryptocurrencies are like rat poison and will inevitably meet their end. And that he would gladly invest in a 5-year put option on Bitcoin." It's not just cryptocurrencies. Warren Buffett doesn't particularly like investing in commodities. Stocks pay dividends, bonds accrue interest, and real estate generates rental income. But if you buy 1 ounce of gold, it's still 1 ounce after a year. You can only hope that its value will increase due to inflation or supply and demand factors. In other words, you can only make a profit if someone buys it at a higher price. The same goes for cryptocurrencies. I nodded. It does seem like a bubble is forming. Taekyu chimed in, "I think so too." Although there are several financial experts gathered here, the first person to encounter cryptocurrencies and make a significant profit from them was none other than Taekyu. Hyunju Nuna said, "Fortunately, the scale is small for a bubble." That's true. The biggest bubble in human history was, of course, the global financial crisis of 2008. The crisis, which began with the collapse of the U.S. housing market, quickly spread around the world, causing enormous damage. The second largest was the Japanese asset price bubble that occurred in 1991. At the peak of the bubble, there was talk of being able to buy the United States by selling Tokyo. However, the bubble burst in an instant, and Japan entered a period of long-term stagnation for 20 years. There is one major difference between the bubbles that have occurred so far and the cryptocurrency bubble. That is whether it is integrated with the existing system. The worst-case scenario is when the government steps in and fuels the bubble. In early 18th century France, a financier or con artist named John Law appeared. He established the Banque Générale with the government's permission, and the French government only accepted banknotes issued by the Banque Générale as taxes. Later, John Law established the Mississippi Company and continued to increase the amount of currency in circulation by exchanging shares for government bonds. However, the Mississippi Company was essentially a paper company that did not generate profits, and the rapid increase in the money supply caused massive inflation. Eventually, the bubble burst and the French financial system was completely shattered. If the government had stepped in and accepted taxes in Bitcoin like back then, it might have exceeded $100,000. Existing bubbles occurred within the established system, while cryptocurrencies are the opposite. Governments are unlikely to welcome cryptocurrencies, which aim for decentralization and degovernmentization. Thanks to this, a bubble that could shake the financial system has not occurred. I asked, "How much higher do you think it will go from here?" Hyunju Nuna replied, "There's even talk of it going up another 30 times. Why? Because the market capitalization of gold is $6 trillion, so Bitcoin should be around that much too. Currently, Bitcoin's market cap is about 3 to 4% of gold's market cap. Therefore, the logic is that it needs to go up another 30 times to replace gold." Thinking about it rationally, the premise that Bitcoin will replace gold is wrong, but investors who have invested in cryptocurrencies seem to believe this. With the current surge, it somehow seems possible. Bubbles thrive on dreams after all. Senior Sang-yeep said, "The investment frenzy is a global phenomenon, but it's particularly severe in Korea. Korea has had higher cryptocurrency prices than other countries for some time, which is called the kimchi premium. However, until recently it was around 5 to 10%, but now it has risen to 30%. Because prices are not linked between exchanges, price differences even between exchanges within Korea have occurred quite frequently. It's only a 1 or 2% difference though. Theoretically, This means you can buy Bitcoin on a US exchange and immediately sell it on a Korean exchange to make a 30% profit. Of course, actually doing so requires a complicated process such as opening a US account and international money transfers, and costs are involved, so it's not easy. Taekyu blinked and said, "Conversely, doesn't that mean you lose 30% if you buy on a Korean exchange and sell on a US exchange?" Surprisingly, he hit the nail on the head. If the prices of the same goods differ, the basic principle of arbitrage trading is to sell the expensive one and buy the cheap one. However, the situation in Korea is the opposite. Even though the same coin is 30% more expensive, the buying spree shows no signs of stopping. Ellie said, "Something like that actually happened recently. Some Japanese individuals brought Bitcoin bought from Japanese exchanges, where the price was relatively low, into Korea and sold it on Korean exchanges. Then with the proceeds of 10 billion won, they bought gold bars and returned to Japan. In conclusion, Bitcoin flowed into Korea and gold flowed out. To be able to exchange digital gold for physical gold. Is this 21st century alchemy? In a bubble, trading volume increases as prices rise. For prices to continue rising, investment funds must constantly flow in from the outside. Fortunately or unfortunately, individuals came in with large sums of money. People who had been watching prices skyrocket were jumping in before it went even higher. There was even a sense of urgency, as if they wouldn't be able to buy it if they didn't buy it now. Why it's going up or what its actual value is doesn't matter. The price is just going up, so buying follows, and as buying follows, the price goes up. Taekyu said, "At this point it's no different from gambling. Whether it's gambling or investing, the one with more capital has the advantage. The big players in the cryptocurrency market are called whales. In the case of Bitcoin, about 1,000 whales hold 40% of the total coins. We are also one of those whales. Since a small number of forces can control the market, it's a game that individuals can't win from the start. Of course, some will make a lot of money, but that's a tiny minority. Most will lose the money they invested." As the cryptocurrency market continued to grow and the number of investors increased, governments in various countries also pondered how to respond. The United States regulated cryptocurrencies as commodities and even allowed futures trading on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Japan also licensed exchanges, established regulatory bodies, and brought them into the system by collecting taxes. While most countries were in the mood to allow trading, China implemented a complete shutdown. All exchanges were ordered to cease operations, and the operation of mining farms was also prohibited. Due to strong government regulations, small exchanges closed down, and large exchanges moved to Hong Kong or Singapore. So what about Korea? They did nothing. There are several reasons for this, but the biggest reason is the lame duck status of the current administration. The current government is virtually in a state of suspended animation. While existing tasks are being processed as usual, they haven't been able to address new issues. Ultimately, some action can be expected after the change of government. But it will be too late by then. I checked before coming, and the value of the coins K company currently holds is $13 billion. We were all surprised by Senior Sang Yeep's words. We knew it had gone up, but we didn't know it was this much. Wasn't it $2.5 billion last time? K Company's investment was $1 billion. Senior Sang Yeep was in charge of cryptocurrency investments, and the investments were made in three forms. First, they additionally purchased shares of Vansum, increasing their stake to 85%. Second, they bought Bitcoin, Ethereum, and newly issued altcoins on overseas exchanges. Lastly, they directly set up mining farms overseas. Tens of thousands of computers are endlessly lined up in the mining farms. I only saw it in pictures, but it was quite a spectacle. Just as miners extract gold from mines, computers extract coins from the digital world. It's literally mining. Competition between companies has reduced the amount of mining itself, but profits continue to increase due to price increases. These coins are assets that are not recorded on the books. If they were to be cashed out, the value of K Company would have to be reassessed. Henry said, even with the valuation, it would be difficult to get even half of that if we actually sold it. Senior Sang Yeep agreed. At least some of the Bitcoin and Ethereum could be absorbed by the market, but the altcoins with small market caps would plummet as soon as a large sell-off occurred. No matter how large it has become, the cryptocurrency market cap is not comparable to the stock or bond markets. If K Company were to dispose of its coins, the entire market would falter. Hyunju Nuna put out her cigarette and said, "The only chance a whale has to escape the pond is when it rains heavily. If a large whale tries to escape the pond on a sunny day, the water level drops rapidly, which is dangerous. So they have to escape when it's raining heavily and the water level rises. There's no disagreement that the current situation is a bubble. The important thing is the timing of the exit." At that moment something flashed before my eyes. Cryptocurrency bubble bursts. When I came to my senses, everyone's attention was on me. "What are you thinking?" I spoke calmly as if nothing had happened. "Let's start selling now." Oh Byung-jun, graduate of Korea University's Department of Business Administration. He successfully broke through the tough job market and landed a position at CS Retail. He had secured his dream job at a major company, but his work life wasn't exactly enjoyable. The work was hard and there was a lot of it. Spending the whole day traveling between retail stores was exhausting. As a new employee, his salary was only around 3.3 million won. After paying rent and living expenses, even if he was frugal, saving 2 million won a month was difficult. He graduated from a top university and got a job at a major corporation. This seemed like a successful life, but for some reason he couldn't see what lay ahead. He had saved diligently for about 2.5 years, skimping on food and clothes, but he had only saved 50 million won. On the other hand, housing prices in Seoul had risen so much that it was impossible to buy a place no matter how hard you saved. It got to the point where the only way to own a home in Seoul was to inherit it from your parents. Will I even be able to get married like this? Since the end of last year, the cryptocurrency craze had swept through universities and even companies. His workplace, CS Retail, was no exception. Although upper management had issued instructions not to invest in stocks or cryptocurrencies during work hours, it couldn't quell the investment fever. Everyone was constantly checking market prices on their smartphones during breaks, rejoicing or sighing. Up until this point, Oh Byung-jun hadn't paid much attention to cryptocurrency investment. His thinking changed after attending a year-end gathering. It was a combined year-end party and reunion with seniors and juniors from his university band, but the conversation topic was entirely cryptocurrency, not music. Those in STEM fields were passionately arguing. The Federal Reserve can issue as many dollars as they want, but Bitcoin has a fixed supply. Traditional currencies lose value over time due to inflation, but cryptocurrencies, due to their scarcity, can only keep going up in value. Someday, cryptocurrencies built with blockchain technology will replace existing currencies. Just like the internet changed the world, blockchain will change the world. And buying coins is investing in that blockchain technology. No telling how much more it'll go up over time. Now's the perfect opportunity to buy. Blockchain, distributed ledger, protocol, hard fork, soft fork, SegWit, and so on. Unintelligible terms flew around. Oh Byung-jun was lost in thought. I understand that blockchain is a groundbreaking new technology, but what does that have to do with coin prices going up? Actually, the really interesting stories were something else entirely. There are quite a few people around us who hit it big with coins. Did you see that current affairs program recently? That guy bought Stuncoin before its ICO and made 60 billion won with it. You know Seongjin? He invested 10 million won in the early days and has made 800 million won so far. He's planning to cash out everything when he has enough to buy a building in Gangnam. Mincheol made a ton of money too. He just bought a Mercedes-Benz E-Class. Oh Byung-jun was shocked. Didn't Senior Seongjin fail to get a job? Yeah. He was just lazing around at home because he couldn't find a job, and then his coin investment hit the jackpot. He breathed a sigh of relief, saying it would have been a disaster if he had gotten a job early. Some people work their tails off all day and barely earn a few hundred, while others make 800 million won from coins at home. There were countless other success stories. Someone bought Ripple, someone else bought Ethereum, and another bought Pi. At this point he started to feel foolish for working hard and saving diligently without looking elsewhere. Think about it. Coins are the last chance for people like us from underprivileged backgrounds to turn our lives around. Is there even one person who lost everything investing in coins? It's not like some coins go down and others go up, they're all just going up. The important thing is finding the ones that will go up more. Finally, a senior who was the president of their club in college chimed in. Even Kang Jin-hoo from your department, remember him? Would he be so rich now if it weren't for Bitcoin? Oh Byung-jun remembered a junior he had seen in college. Everyone knew that the initial investment for OTK company came from Bitcoin. On his way home after the gathering, Oh Byung-joon installed the Binance app on his smartphone and looked at the exchanges. He also joined the Bitcoin website and group chat rooms to gather information. Everyone who invested was making money and they were posting proof of their profits. The returns were unbelievable. If you only posted a 100% profit, you'd be mocked for not making more. Is making money this easy? Oh Byung-joon carefully chose a cryptocurrency. The coin he selected was Ripple. Unlike other coins with distributed ledger systems, Ripple operates on a private blockchain led by the Ripple Company. It was created from the beginning with the goal of replacing financial transactions, so transaction processing was significantly faster than other coins, especially for interbank transfers. Each coin had differences in its issuing purpose, method, and quantity, but that wasn't a very important issue. The only important thing was this: how much more will it go up in the future? Unlike the stock market, cryptocurrency exchanges are open 24 hours a day, even on weekends. As long as the servers don't go down, you can trade anytime. Oh Byung-joon invested 5 million won and bought Ripple at 1,200 won. He planned to start with a small investment and gradually increase the amount. But just a few days after investing, something amazing happened. News broke that Ripple was collaborating with major banks on money transfers, and it instantly surged by 100%. He made over 5 million won in just a few days. I should have bought more. Before his regret could fully form, the price even broke through 3,000 won, and his profit increased to 10 million won. He worked overtime until he was bone-tired and his salary was only 3.3 million won, but coins were jumping by millions of won in a single day. Moreover, there was an abundance of good news on the horizon. Ripple had already partnered with several banks, and it seemed like it would completely replace the international money transfer system within a few years. Thinking this, he felt anxious. If it went up any further, it would be harder to buy. As the price headed towards 4,000 won, it briefly paused and dropped to 3,400 won. Oh Byung-joon quickly liquidated his remaining 45 million won and bought more. Please just go to 5,000 won. As he hoped, a few days later, Ripple broke through 4,000 won and rose to become the second largest cryptocurrency by market cap, surpassing Ethereum and trailing only Bitcoin. Oh Byung-joon threw his arms up and cheered. Yes. Bubbles make everyone happy. The developers who created and issued the cryptocurrencies, the investors who bought them, and the operators who ran the exchanges. No one was losing money, everyone was making it. But this situation couldn't last forever. This was easy to understand with a little thought. For prices to keep rising, liquidity had to be endlessly supplied. Someone had to buy the coin someone else bought for 1,000 won for 1,500 won, and then the next person had to buy it for 2,000 won. It had the form of a Ponzi scheme. Of course, it's hard to definitively say that cryptocurrencies themselves have no value. But they weren't immediately replacing existing fiat currencies or creating any added value. Eventually, the moment someone couldn't find someone to buy it at a higher price, that is, the moment the inflow of funds stopped, it was bound to crash. However, no one thought deeply about that point. Even if it was a bubble, it didn't matter. Everyone was confident that they would be able to escape at the last moment. But, not long after the new year began, several negative events happened simultaneously. The biggest problem was the news that the Presidential Transition Committee had formed a cryptocurrency task force and was considering a complete shutdown of exchanges. Also in the US, investigations into exchanges for price manipulation and illegal transactions had begun, and Checkcoin, Japan's largest exchange, had been hacked and 60 billion yen worth of cryptocurrency had been stolen. When these facts became known, the coins that had been rising endlessly began to plummet. Korea, where prices were already about 30% higher, experienced a much steeper drop than other countries. From this point on, Oh Byung-joon wasn't in his right mind. He couldn't sleep and stayed up all night. He couldn't put his smartphone down even when eating or going to the bathroom. Should I sell now? But it looked like it would rebound any minute. He couldn't focus on work, and even at the office he kept checking exchange rates every minute. Contrary to his desperate wishes, Ripple continued to fall. The chart looked like a waterfall cascading down. In an instant he lost all his previous profits and even started losing his initial investment. Unlike stocks, cryptocurrencies have no daily price limits, and there are no safety measures like circuit breakers or sidecars. When prices were soaring, this was an advantage, but when they crashed, it was a different story. What happened while I was sleeping? I checked the price in my sleep and thought it was a dream, but I woke up and it was real. What the hell is this crash? We absolutely have to HO. If the foreign big investors start buying the dip, it'll moon again. Pay close attention to the futures market. The big players are just shaking things up for a bit. Now is the last chance to get on board. There aren't any idiots who haven't bought yet, right? Stuncoin, let's go. There had been various negative events in the cryptocurrency market before, and each time there had been a crash. Nevertheless, the overall trend had been consistently upward. That's why everyone thought this crash was just a temporary correction. Ripple stopped falling around 2,601 and started to attempt a slight rebound. This changed his thinking. Seeing a coin that was 4,501 drop to 2,601 made it seem very cheap. Maybe now was a good buying opportunity? Oh Byung-jun withdrew 40 million won from his line of credit and bought more Ripple. Averaging down would lower his purchase price, and he could recover his principal much faster if it rebounded. The opposite was that if it crashed further he would be ruined. Oh Byung-jun cried out, praying desperately. Ripple, let's go. Golden Gate's Korean branch immediately sold off its holdings, making a profit of over $100 million. And Senior Sang Yeep also continued to sell off the coins he held. K Company's coin holdings were beyond what the domestic exchanges could handle. Even if they had to give up the kimchi premium, higher prices on Korean exchanges, they continuously sold on US and Japanese exchanges with high trading volume. Still, the upward trend didn't stop. Bubbles burn their brightest just when you think they're about to burst. On overseas exchanges, Bitcoin stopped just short of $20,000, but on Korean exchanges, it temporarily hit 28.8 million won. Just when everyone was filled with anticipation that it would break 30 million won. Various negative events hit and it began to crash. In less than 10 days, Bitcoin fell by more than half to 14 million won. Even then, everyone on the Bitcoin message boards where cryptocurrency investors gathered was shouting, "Let's go," in unison. In the past, whenever there was an issue, cryptocurrencies had crashed, but they quickly recovered to their previous highs. That's why everyone was in a mood of expecting a rebound this time as well. The biggest victims of this crash were individuals who had jumped into the market late. Just as individual stock investors prefer Kosdaq, which has higher growth potential, over the Kospi, which has already risen significantly, the same was true for cryptocurrency investment. Most people bought altcoins like Paydex or Stellmanta, priced at a few hundred or a few thousand won, rather than Bitcoin, which was priced at over 20 million won. In fact, the rate of increase for these coins far surpassed Bitcoin. The problem was that the opposite happened when they fell. Bitcoin at least stopped falling at 14 million won and temporarily formed a support line, but altcoins continued to fall endlessly. Coins that had risen significantly returned all their gains, becoming half or even a third of their previous value. I asked Taekyu, who was staring at the Bitcoin message board, "What's the atmosphere like over there?" "It's changed from let's go to the Han River. They're recruiting members for a Han River gathering." Generally, a Han River gathering means spreading out a mat in Han River Park and eating fried chicken and beer, but in this case, it means jumping into the Han River to commit suicide. Most of it is a joke, but people do actually jump sometimes. That's why there are counseling hotlines installed on the Han River bridges. The message board was a scene of utter chaos. Watching it reminded me of when Mountain Hill went bankrupt. For reference, the Bitcoin price at that time was only 1.2 million won. But now, even after the crash, it's 14 million won. It makes you realize how ridiculously high it went up in the meantime. Just as I was thinking that, Taekyu, who was still looking at the message board, said, "There's some good news in the midst of all this." "What is it?" "The water temperature of the Han River has gone up a bit." The essence of stocks lies in the companies themselves, and companies continuously generate value. Just because someone bought Samsung Electronics for 1 million won and sold it for 2 million won, doesn't mean the person who bought it later lost 1 million won. This is because Samsung Electronics announces new products every year and earns money to distribute to its shareholders. The stock market is an open market, and it's entirely possible for all participants to profit. That's why stock investing is distinct from gambling and is socially encouraged. On the other hand, the cryptocurrency market was essentially a zero-sum game. For someone to profit, someone else had to lose. The reason cryptocurrency prices had surged until now was the belief that they would continue to rise. However, as the inflow of liquidity reached its limit, various negative events occurred, triggering a crash. From the time Bitcoin exceeded $15,000, K Company continuously sold its holdings of the coin. Even though they haven't sold even half of it, most cryptocurrencies have already halved from their peak. As bargain hunting came in and a temporary rebound succeeded, individuals once again chanted, "Let's go." It seems like it's slowly rebounding. Should I stop selling? I shook my head at Senior Sangiop's question. Sell as much as possible while they're buying. According to Oracle, this isn't a temporary dip, but the beginning of a bubble burst. The whales who control the cryptocurrency market were not happy about the crash. However, as we continued to sell, the rebounding market turned downward again, and some forces who couldn't withstand it also joined the sell-off. Taikyu said, "Thinking about it, it's a funny situation. They once said that cryptocurrency was digital gold and a new currency to replace fiat currency in the future, but now they're trying to sell cryptocurrency to buy fiat currency. Dollar is still the best." Bitcoin even broke below the $10,000 mark and altcoins continued to plummet. The coins that had seen the biggest gains experienced the steepest declines. Ripple, which once reached 4,501 and climbed to become the second largest cryptocurrency by market cap, fell below 1,001 and became a penny coin again. TV channels reported on the cryptocurrency crash as a major news story every day. This isn't the first or second time cryptocurrency has crashed. When Mount Hill went bankrupt due to hacking in the past, there was also a significant crash, but it didn't become as big of an issue as it is now. That's how much the situation has changed since then. The number of cryptocurrencies has increased and the market has grown. Until early last year, only a very small number of people invested in cryptocurrencies. However, around the end of last year, that number increased dozens of times. Office workers, housewives, college students, everyone jumped in. There were even cases of middle and high school students investing their allowance. How many of these people understood blockchain and invested based on that understanding? There's a saying in stock market proverbs that when housewives and monks appear in the trading floor, it's the peak. Joseph Kennedy, the father of the 35th U.S. President John F. Kennedy, sold all his stocks after overhearing a shoeshine boy asking about stocks. Afterwards, the Great Depression occurred in the United States. In Korea too, after housewives carrying babies on their backs flocked to the trading floor with cash, shouting to buy Kosdaq stocks, the Kosdaq bubble burst. China also experienced a stock market crash after monks gathered to buy stocks. The Bitcoin Forum, until recently, was a neverland full of dreams and hopes. But in just a few days it turned into Avicii. My wedding is in May, and I've lost not only the wedding expenses but also the jaunts money I received from my parents. My fiancé doesn't know about this and is choosing where to go for our honeymoon and where to have our new home. What should I do now? I started with 300 million won of seed money, which was all my savings from running a mobile phone store plus a loan I took out with my parents' house as collateral. I told my parents I was opening another store, and bought Zent at 533 won. Then I sold it around 1200 won, but after that it went straight up to 2800 won, haha. Anyway, in 4 days 300 million won became 700 million won. That's exactly 100 million won earned per day. But from this point on my life started going downhill. I decided to invest in major coins instead of altcoins to invest more stably. Looking back, if I wanted to invest stably I should have stayed away from coins. It looked like Bantcoin would break through 30 million won, so I went in intending to make a small profit and get out, but it slid down to 14 million won without stopping. I pulled everything out and thought about going back to Zent, so I bought at 1,200 won. It broke below 700 won in 2 days. I sold it and then saw it rebound sharply and break through 1,000 won, so I went back in and got wrecked. Zent tricked me again. I lost all the money I made and now I have 180 million won left in seed money. From this point I tried to recover my principal by chasing rallies and buying every coin imaginable. In the end I went all in on Florex, and in half a day after buying, the price went from 13,000 won to 6,000 won. Now I have exactly 17 million won left in my hand. What should I tell my parents? I can't even laugh at you. Stay strong. Doesn't feel like it's someone else's problem. Don't lose hope. If you ride one coin well, it can go up tenfold in an instant. They're doing an ICO for Orc coin soon, so buy some. I even got a cash advance and went all in. Finally hit minus 90%. I don't feel like buying anymore, so I'm going to the Han River. It was a dirty life. See you in the next life. Don't sell, just jump. At least reduce the selling pressure. Since you're going to die anyway, I'd appreciate it if you could send your remaining coins to my Ban Them account. I'd like to request that as well. Any coin is fine. I don't even have money for food. Please help me. Even a little help would be appreciated. Stuck on the Ripple 4300th floor. When will the rescue team arrive? Crazy. Oh. What were you thinking buying a coin that used to be less than 101 at that price? Ripple tricked you again. You sucker. Ripple tricked you again? Do you think the rescue team can climb up that high? Even the 1500th floor is too much. I'm on the bit 2730th floor. Please, let's go to the moon. Thanks to Black Angus's like you, someone managed to escape, so think of it as doing a good deed. Even if this life is hell, you'll go to heaven when you die. If you're down more than 70%, there's no point in selling at a loss. Just hodl is the answer. Fucking forced to hodl. Those who jumped in early were better off. However, those who joined late and got caught at the peak suffered extreme losses. Some investors directed their anger towards the Presidential Transition Committee that had mentioned regulations. Has the government ever let its citizens have happy dreams? We were able to have dreams we'd never had in Korea before because of cryptocurrency. We believe that cryptocurrency is the fourth industrial revolution, so we're investing in it. Please don't take away the happiness and dreams we've had for the first time. Those are some great words. Does it make sense for the government to ruin a thriving market with regulations? Blockchain is the core of the fourth industrial revolution. Government, activate cryptocurrency investment and foster blockchain. That's right. Let's revive the economy with Bitcoin. Let's gather the suckers and hold a rally in Gwangwamun to demand recovery of our principal. When the president takes office, invest the national pension in Ethereum and make it moon. The higher the mountain, the deeper the valley. Bitcoin plummeted by 70%, Ethereum by 80%, and most altcoins by over 90%. Bubbles leave aftereffects. People who lost their entire fortune or went into debt were common. Unfortunately, there's no real way to help them. One fortunate thing is that the shock didn't spread to the overall economy. Based on the peak, the market cap of cryptocurrencies listed on major exchanges exceeded $1 trillion. This was the total for the entire world, and Korea accounted for less than 1/10 of it. Also, the cryptocurrency bubble burst had few connections with the existing economic system. For example, if real estate prices plummet, it doesn't end there. It creates problems for banks that provided loans, tenants, construction companies, contractors, and so on, negatively impacting the overall economy. In short, the scale was small and there were few related industries, so the shock was relatively less severe. If the cryptocurrency market cap had been larger and linked to the financial sector through collateralized loans, etc., it wouldn't have ended like this. Due to these points, most people thought it was fortunate that it burst now. Due to the bubble burst, the cryptocurrency market cap shrank to $300 billion, and a period of sideways trading followed for a while. The amount of cryptocurrency K companies sold on overseas exchanges and converted to cash was $7.2 billion. In an instant, the company's assets increased by over 8 trillion won. Nevertheless, there was still a significant amount of unsold supply. The mining farms were still producing coins. Senior Sanjiop, who owned shares in K company, was beaming. What are you going to do with the exchange? We should invest and continue to grow it. Even though it crashed, the market itself hasn't disappeared. Unlike securities firms, cryptocurrency exchanges don't require authorization from the authorities. Anyone can establish one simply by registering. As a result, exchanges sprang up like mushrooms when the investment boom occurred. Among them, there were many with low trading volume and poor security. Once the market stabilizes, there will be a sorting out of the good and the bad, whether it's cryptocurrencies or exchanges. The emergence of the internet caused the dot-com bubble. The full-fledged internet era began and IT companies started to grow after the bubble burst. Whether cryptocurrencies will create value and grow again, or completely collapse as Warren Buffett said, remains to be seen. When I opened my eyes, a beautiful brunette was asleep next to me. The hectic period at Golden Gate's Korean branch had passed, and things had become a bit more relaxed. Ellie usually rested on weekends and we enjoyed our dates. We went to late-night movies or went for drives in the suburbs, but most of our dates were at home. It was difficult to go out because our faces were well known. Like now, we often played until late and she'd sleep over at my place. Sensing my gaze, Ellie slowly opened her eyes. Why are you looking at me like that? Because it's amazing. What is? That we're together like this. If I hadn't invested and had continued going to school, wouldn't I have never met Ellie? Then we wouldn't be together like this now, right? Hearing my words, Ellie said, we still would have met though. I could have gone to see Korea University with Jessica, or you could have come to Hong Kong with Taekyu to meet Jessica. I guess that's possible. We smiled at each other before embracing and kissing. If you're fully awake, shall we have some coffee first? That's a good idea. We got out of bed and put on our pajamas. Opening the curtains, Ellie exclaimed in surprise. Wow! The garden visible outside the window had turned pure white overnight. And heavy snow was still falling. Ellie stared at the scene with a dazed expression. It's so beautiful. I walked over to her side. Do you like snow? Of course. Like I said before, it doesn't snow in Hong Kong, so I still find it amazing when I see snow. We went downstairs to the first floor to make coffee. We brewed coffee, took a cup each, and stood by the window watching the snow pile up. Ellie said, taking a sip of her coffee, winter is slowly coming to an end. This might be the last snow. Taekyu, who had woken up early for once, came into the living room in his pajamas. It's snowing a lot. I don't think we can go out today. I nodded. Yeah, looks like it. We'll have to cook at home. After we eat, should we make a snowman? Are you a kid? But Ellie clapped her hands in delight. Great idea. Let's make one together. February has many events. First, in Korea, the presidential inauguration took place. Park Si-hyung's 5-year term as president ended, and Hyo Chong-min of the New Politics Party was inaugurated as president. The first thing he did was to launch a reinvestigation into the so-called cyber warfare unit operations and civilian surveillance, which had been problematic during the previous administration. Naturally, the National Intelligence Service and the Defense Security Command were the targets. The New Politics Party insisted on a special prosecutor investigation into Park Si-hyung's various allegations, the PAS beneficial owner issue, ordering civilian surveillance, ordering conservative groups orchestrated protests, hidden overseas assets, etc. While the Liberty National Party, now the opposition party, opposed it vehemently, calling it political retaliation against the previous administration. However, the party was severely divided, the pro-Park faction's power had weakened, and public opinion supported the special prosecutor. With various pieces of evidence and testimonies already appearing, it wasn't easy to simply oppose it unconditionally. Eventually, the special prosecutor was highly likely to be passed in some form. Apart from the domestic political situation, an important event was waiting for us. It was the launch of Caro's new car model.